George S. Patton did not believe in civilized war. In March 1945, as his Third Army smashed through the Rhine, the old blood and guts was already planning his most controversial move. While the world watched the falling of the Reich, a secret order was being whispered in the corridors of power. Patton was looking at thousands of German POWs, men who had fought with the ferocity of wolves, and he decided they needed to see the one thing that would break their spirit of conquest: the eternal walls of ice. The first 4 minutes of this story are sensitive because they challenge our perception of justice. Should the men who served the Nazi regime be punished with hard labor or shown the majesty of the American landscape? Patton chose a psychological pattern interrupt. He didn't send them to a dark cell. He sent them into the heart of the American wild. In the early months of 1945, the logistics were a nightmare. Operation Paperclip was already pulling scientists, but Patton was interested in the grunts, the farm boys from Bavaria, and the panzer commanders from Berlin. He ordered a select group to be transported across the Atlantic, past the Statue of Liberty, and deep into the rugged peaks of the American West. Why? Because Patton knew that the best way to defeat an ideology wasn't just with bullets, but by showing the enemy that the world they tried to conquer was far greater and far more permanent than a thousand-year Reich. Most people will scroll past this because they can't handle the complexity of history. If you're one of the few who actually values the truth over a 5-second soundbite, hit that subscribe button. Don't be the reason real history dies on the vine. By the time the train cars reached the base of the mountains, the German soldiers were terrified. They had heard rumors of Soviet gulags and expected the American version to be just as brutal. Instead, they stepped out into the crisp, thin air of the Montana wilderness. Here, the eternal walls of ice, the massive glaciers that have carved the continent for millennia, loomed over them. The retention of this story lies in the forbidden luxury. These prisoners weren't starving. Under the guidelines of the Geneva Convention, which Patton followed with a strange, ironclad respect, these men were fed better than many civilians in war-torn Europe. They were given chocolate, fresh meat, and cigarettes. But there was a catch. They weren't there to vacation, they were there to work. Under the shadow of the glaciers, the German POWs were tasked with clearing trails and maintaining the very park that felt like their home in the Alps. This creates a powerful SEO-friendly narrative, the secret labor of the enemy. As they worked, something strange happened. The denazification didn't happen in a classroom, it happened on the trails. They saw the vastness of a country they had been told was weak and fractured. You've made it this far, which means you care, but caring isn't enough. If you don't share this video, you're letting the algorithm decide what people see. Do you really want influencers to be the only source of history for the next generation? As the war officially ended in May 1945, the fate of these men hung in the balance. Many expected to be shipped back to a destroyed Germany to face starvation or Soviet occupation. But the ending of this story is what makes the Germans happy and your viewers subscribe: the legacy of humanity. The eternal walls of ice had changed them. When the time for repatriation finally came, many of these POWs wept, not because they were prisoners, but because they didn't want to leave the peace they had found in the American wilderness. History records that many of these enemies became the biggest ambassadors for the American spirit. Decades later, former POWs returned to the U.S. as tourists, bringing their families to see the trails they had built. They didn't come back as conquerors, but as survivors who found their soul in the mountains of their enemy. By replacing the walls of hate with the walls of ice, the lesson is this: kindness is often a more powerful weapon than cruelty. While violence can break a man's body, showing him a better way of life is the only way to change his mind. The moral is that true victory isn't found in the humiliation of your opponent, but in the transformation of an enemy into a friend. If we treat those we defeat with the dignity they denied others, we prove that our values are actually worth defending.